Okay, so I want to talk about the subject of friendship and trust. It's quite a personal video and quite a reflective video, and I have made a similar one before, but I've got so many videos on my channel that sometimes people just come across a particular video and they can comment on it. If I tend to repeat videos, it's only because I'm thinking about the topic at a particular time. So to be honest, I don't care that much about repeating myself. Um, I've had a number of experiences in recent years that have been very testing, personally, in terms of friendship, in terms of friends that I thought were close and then drifted away for whatever reason. I've also been on the other side of the equation where there's been people who have felt that they were close to me and I just didn't feel that way. Um, I'll be talking about social media in this as well because that comes into what I'm thinking about. And people can feel free to maybe share their own experiences here. One thing I think is true to say is that true, sincere friendship, close friendship, if we're being absolutely honest, is really not that common. Some people may give the perception that they're very popular and they've got lots of friends, and they may well have a lot of acquaintances that they get on with. But I think most people, regardless of who you are, only really has a very small number of very genuinely close friends. And it is true that you get people who are more social than others. It's true that you get people that are more popular than others because they just have a more likable, amicable personality. But even those people, they still have to deal with the trust factor with other people. And there's always a risk that if you're too much of a decent person, it's perhaps more easy to be taken advantage of because people think incorrectly that you're a pushover. I'm not going to make myself out to be a monk. I try to be a decent guy, but I'm not. That's. I try to be a decent person, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm a saint. I'm not. But I try to be a decent person. I try to be honest in myself. Um, and if I'm being honest, I like getting on with people. I prefer getting on with people than not getting on with people. I don't particularly enjoy confrontation. But I have been in situations where I thought that I was close to someone to the point where I consider them a close friend, and that person has let me down quite a bad way, in quite a bad way, I should say. Either by simply not replicating friendship or by drifting away. Because that actually, it's something that we don't often speak about, but in sociology, I guess you could look at it as almost a form of grief. We tend to think of grief as someone dying in our lives, but actually, grief can also come from someone going away from our life. And that's something I've had to deal with on a number of occasions. I've had people say to me they consider me their best friend, and then that just fizzled out, fizzles out. I think sometimes you have to be astute and assertive with these things. Sometimes people sort of get themselves into a trap where they're too trusting or they're too reliant on others, emotionally speaking. I'm not talking about in terms of materialistically, money, that sort of thing. I mean emotionally reliant on others. Like they expect, for one thing, we have to, and I guess it's something I've learned. I had a slightly naive concept that everyone, or most people, kind of had a set of polite principles. And I was a bit naive in that. I freely admit that I was naive to think that most people kind of stuck by these principles. So, for example, my notion of politeness is if you send a message to someone, you reply to that person. Um, I certainly try to do it myself, but others don't necessarily do that. So, I've kind of learned over the last 2 years or so that not everyone has the same set of standards of what decent behavior is. And sometimes it's just a case of simply not caring. It doesn't necessarily mean they're bad people. And like I say, I'm not presenting myself as a saint here. There's people I can't be bothered with as well. I do tend to reply to people if they message me. That's just an example. But I've experienced this from both sides because I've had people who I felt close to, and then they gradually drifted away from my life, and I was still in touch, but there was a distance there, and it, in many cases, was a physical distance because they were from other countries and they went back to their home country, so that was a practical physical distance. But in some cases, there was also a clear distance in terms of the friendship, in terms of how that came across. And from my perspective, people just started acting differently. But I've been on the other side of this equation. You know, I'm connected to quite a lot of people on Facebook. Not as many as I used to be, but quite a lot of people. And many of those people I don't consider good friends. I consider them genuinely acquaintances. So, from my point of view, I'm not being insincere and being connected with them because I'm acquainted with them because we're maybe in a shared group or we have shared interests. But I've had people come to me and actually insinuate they were insulted by me because I had one person, for example, from Nigeria, and she has obviously taken this online connection much more seriously than I have. And she took it as a real personal slight that I didn't. She actually phoned me up all the way from Nigeria. I made a mistake giving her my phone number, but I'd always said to her, look, yeah, we have some shared interests. I think we met on some mutual group. We spoke a few times, but I never ever, from my perspective, gave the impression I ever wanted to be. Certainly not romantically attached, but I kind of thought, yeah, she seems like a nice person and we kind of get on well, and that's, acquaintances. But she sent me some very in depth sentimental messages. And it put me in quite an awkward position because I thought this person is clearly weighing into this a lot more than I am. So I said, okay, there's only one solution. I'm going to have to just be honest with her. And I did the last time she brought this up. I said, look, I'm sorry to be so blunt about this, but I just don't see you as a very close friend. I see you as an online friend, an acquaintance. And I was very candid about that. And I didn't feel good about it. I felt a bit guilty because I felt, okay, that's probably going to hurt her feelings. But sometimes you have to be candid with people. And sometimes people think that they're being kind by saying what they think the other person wants to hear. So when I've had people who I cared about say to me, I'm their best friend, maybe from their perspective, they were just trying to be kind to me. Now, I would much prefer, in retrospect, they said what I said to the Nigerian girl, i.e., oh, I see you as an acquaintance, and that's it. Because then I'd be able to deal with them drifting away. So, this is something that I feel people need to approach with a large degree of assertiveness and a certain degree of mental toughness as well. The fact of the matter is, no matter who you are, no matter what background you have, people will let you down in life. And this is something I've learned in the past 2 years. And we, as people, will let others down, even if we don't mean it at times. Because none of us are perfect, and there will be times when we will let others down. If you're a decent person, you won't do it intentionally. But we've all been let down, and we all will at some point let others down. And that's not good, but the lesson from this is, in my opinion, to be assertive. There's very, very, very few people in life who really are with us all the time. And when people leave our life, it's not necessarily that they've betrayed us, it's that they were part of our history for that time. It doesn't mean that they're bad people, and it doesn't mean we've done anything wrong. It's a faultless situation. Someone close to me made the analogy, if we sort of think of life as a train journey, you get different stops along the way. Some people get off at one stop and get off at the next. Others get off at one stop and they stay along. for a long part of the journey. Think of it like the Trans-Siberian Railroad, 11,000 kilometers. Some people will stay on for 500 kilometers. Some people will stay on for 9,000 kilometers. The point is, if you think of that like a lifetime line, the majority of people will get off in the early stops. And in my opinion, it's one of the hardest things that we learn in life is letting people go. I'm not even talking about romantic situations, and that's certainly hard enough. We've all been there. At least a lot of us have. I certainly have. And that's very hard. But I'm not just talking about romantic situations, I'm also talking about friendship. And accepting that people are out of our life, that they've drifted away, it's a real learning challenge. It really is. And having the happy memory sometimes isn't enough because we beat ourselves up with why has this person drifted away? What have I done to deserve this? And yet, probably if we're being honest with ourselves, we have been in situations where the other person has invested more in what they felt about us than what we felt about them. Like I said, that example I gave of the online situation. No doubt that Nigerian girl felt let down by me. And yet I never went out, I never sought to let her down. I never gave her any false promises. I never called her a great friend or anything like that. But people perceive things in different ways. And when you have someone that you feel that you're close to and then something changes, firstly, I think we have to not beat ourselves up. If in your candid consciousness, you know you've done nothing wrong, then you can't beat yourself up over it. Sometimes it really is just circumstances. Maybe they genuinely are just busier in their life. Personally, though, I do think that busyness can be used as an excuse. But at the same time, I think people do have busy lives and circumstances change. And it's just a fact of life that we lose touch with people. I've lost touch with a lot of people. Some I cared more about than others. And it's not that I had any malicious feelings towards people I didn't care that much about, but it's just that. It didn't affect me as much because I wasn't as emotionally invested in the friendship. Others did get to me. And to be completely honest, I still think about it sometimes. Well, indeed I am now, which is why I'm making this video. So I'm sure most people watching this can relate to what I'm talking about. All I would say is it's a constant learning process. This is not something that can be dealt with overnight. It's a learning process, takes time, and we just have to accept the fact that we will at some point be let down by people. The question is, how do we deal with it? Do we brood on it? Do we just feel miserable and think, why have they gone? I think one thing that is a good thing is to think, well, there's millions of people out there. Okay, this person has left my life, but other people will come into my life. That's a way to look at it. And it may be that we have a particular memory of a particular person that's a pleasant memory, and we miss that memory. And then the next person that comes along isn't quite the same. But then when they leave, we'll miss them, and so forth and so on. So we just cannot know the future, and it's not a case that one person leaves, that's the end of it. Unless, of course, you're a very unpleasant, antisocial person. But if you're a reasonably decent person, then people are going to respond amicably to you. That's my perception anyway. Um, so it isn't easy. But there isn't always a great conspiracy. It's not always a case that someone has, left because of something that we have done. Sometimes it really is just circumstance. Or maybe that's just their way of, maybe they just never cared that much to begin with. And from the other point of view, it's also how we deal with it. When we get someone who's a bit too clingy or a bit too, they care about us more than we care about them, I think the most important thing is to be honest. It's even better being rude on the spot than it is, in my opinion, to mislead someone. I would never ever tell someone they're a best friend or a great friend if they're not. Um, the negative experiences I've had with being let down by people, the positive side to that is that it has made me a bit tougher. So in the future, I'm not going to emotionally invest so much in people, but we just take things as they come at the time and just enjoy it as it is at the time. I guess the same applies to romantic relationships, but for the purpose of this, I'm really talking about friendship. And I'll round it up there. Let me know your thoughts.